Syphon Filter was not a game I was expecting to be playing. I guess because Sony is pushing out so many of their classic games on PS5 and I've been in a classic video game mood, I decided to give this game a chance. I remember playing a little bit of Syphon Filter on the PSP, but I never owned those games, but thankfully those games are on PS5 as well, so maybe I'll cover them soon too. But when it comes to the first game, I really don't have much memory of it. I remember seeing it on a demo disc, but it wasn't a playable demo. And outside of that, I don't know anybody that ever talked about Syphon Filter, but the funny thing is Syphon Filter got high review scores back in the day, so it has to be a great game, right? Before we get further in this review, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that hype button. I'm showing you what the hype button is right now on the screen. I'm grateful for each and every one of you stopping by, as you could be watching anyone on YouTube, but you decided to watch me. I'm so blessed that Jehovah God and Jesus Christ brought me into a new year, and I pray that you all are having a great year as well. Once again, I'm grateful and thankful for each and every one of you stopping by. Now let's get back into the review. Syphon Filter could be described as a third-person shooter stealth game with a sprinkling of puzzle solving and platforming. The majority of the gameplay is shooting bad guys, so that would mean that the shooting needs to be on point for this game to be enjoyable. And that's where the first problem lies. This game has a horrible frame rate, and I mean even for the time. I'm not sure what frame rate this game is running at, but it's running at what feels to be below 30 frames per second. Some people say it runs at 20 frames per second, even on PS5, which is where I'm playing it. Now, this isn't the biggest deal in the world because Syphon Filter has probably one of the most unique third-person shooting lock-on systems I've seen in a game. Unlike every other game, this game actually directly tells the player when the enemy is going to attack them. So you have a few meters on your screen. You have your health, you have a danger meter, and you have a target meter. The danger meter is what I'm trying to focus on. This meter tells you when the AI will be able to hit you. Even if you're standing still doing nothing, bullets will just whiz past Gabe. Now, at first, this makes the game feel really easy. But as you progress through the game, each stage the enemy gets more and more dangerous. Once you get to the end game, you're going to need pinpoint accuracy to take out anybody with consistency. And that's due to the fact that this game has a flat jacket system, which is basically armor in this game. The enemies have armor and you can even get armor for yourself. Really, your armor is your health bar. Once your armor depletes, you can only take like 1 or 2 bullets and Gabe is going to die. So you basically need armor in order to live. But the enemies with armor is very interesting. Like I said, in the beginning of the game, it's easy. If an enemy has armor, you could just lock on them and just unload bullets on them and they'll just die because the armor is weak. But when you get to the middle half of the game, what ends up happening is you'll realize that you'll need to use so many bullets to shoot the enemy. And while you're busy locking on and shooting them, they're still shooting at you and the danger meter will fill and then they can actually hit you and you'll just die. So how do you actually kill them quickly? There's a first-person camera view in this game that brings up a cursor and you can aim. And if you hit an enemy in the head one time, they're dead. This is where the game goes from a third-person lock-on shooter to primarily becoming a first-person shooter. It's very weird. There are a lot of games from this time period that blended lock-on shooting with a first-person mode, but in those games, it was strictly to be accurate. Here, yeah, it's to be accurate, but at a certain point, I'm telling you, you have no choice but to go in first person because if you try to do anything else, you're going to die. But this is where the problem lies. Remember that frame rate I mentioned? Well, it's really difficult to control Gabe with this low frame rate. This is why anyone saying that frame rate doesn't matter, yeah, it doesn't matter sometimes. There are games in which low frame rate isn't a big deal. Ocarina of Time had a low frame rate, but Ocarina of Time did not have moments where I had to have pinpoint accuracy from enemies trying to shoot me at lightning speeds. In a game like that, you need high frame rates or you're going to end up with results like this. Now, it's not too bad as there is a lean mechanic so you can hide behind an item and then lean over and take a shot at an enemy. And for the most part, this cursor is pretty accurate. So you can even shoot guys through cracks. And you never have to be concerned whether or not a headshot will count because the game will directly tell you that this bullet will be a headshot, which means you'll get a kill. And a little pro tip, when Gabe goes into first person while standing up, he's already aiming at head level to most enemies. And if he's crouching and an enemy is crouching, he'll be head level with a crouching enemy. That's something Jehovah God pointed out to me as I was playing the game. I enjoyed my time picking enemies apart by shooting them in the head, and even when I did get the opportunity to do some run and gunning with the lock-on aiming, it was fun. The frame rate wasn't the biggest of deals by itself. What made the frame rate issues even worse than what it was had to do with this game's difficulty curve. This game has one of the worst ways of increasing difficulty that I can't stand. Guess how they increase difficulty in this game? They spawn enemies all over the place. You can clear an entire floor, move forward, and then all of a sudden a guy will spawn behind you. Not because there's some reason or some door that he came from behind you. No, he just pops out of thin air. This is not a good way to make a game harder. It just makes the game annoying and frustrating. And trust me, midway through the game, they do this constantly. It began to make every encounter feel like trial and error. You would go into a room full of bad guys, shoot them all up, win, and then take a few steps, and the next thing you know, enemies will spawn right behind you. Once you realize that, then you know in this section that's going to happen, so you can quickly turn around and deal with the backfire.
Jehovah God just reminded me of something I experienced in this game. Let me tell you how crazy it gets with the enemy spawns. There's a mission in this game where you have to sneak into this snow base and take out guys stealthily. And one of the mission objectives requires you to kill an important figure in this base. Once you do this, the alarm goes off. Maybe there's another way to do it without the alarm going off, but I didn't know of a way. The point is, once you do this, the game locks you into a checkpoint, so you can't start over. The enemies are falling off of rooftops. They're spawning behind you, in front of you, all over the place. This is a very intense mission, and I get that, like, maybe spawning enemies everywhere was the idea here. But it was so frustrating. I prayed to Jehovah God multiple times because it was just that bad. And matter of fact, the ending requires you to get to this bunker, and you can even skip past a lot of the enemies. But I was so fixated on trying to survive and take them all out because I thought that's what you had to do, that I just ended up running towards the end and making it through. And it was only by the grace of God I did that, because at first I was trying to stand my ground and he told me just keep going forward, and then the mission ended. So I'm telling you, the responding enemies in this game are crazy, way overdone.
You ever played a game and you just get to the point where you just take a deep breath and just say, okay, I died, here we go again, let's just go through it again. That's happened so many times while I was playing Syphon Filter. The only good thing I can say is it didn't ruin the entire game or anything bad like that, but it was just like that classic 90s. Let's just increase the difficulty to make the game feel longer, which is crazy because this game is kind of long. I was surprised how many, it's 20 missions. I was surprised it was this long, and they made it feel longer because it was not harder. When I say hard, I mean good, fair challenge. This was, like I said, frustrating. But I'm not going to leave the shooting part in a bad note because there are good things about it. Shooting enemies is satisfying whether you're locking on or getting a headshot. Because enemy aggression does increase over the time period of the game, when you are in a heated gunfight and you pull off multiple headshots back to back, it is fun to do. Not only that, but this game gives you tons of guns, and this is where we'll get into the exploration, but a lot of the best guns in the game, like the grenade launcher and some of the most powerful grenades in the game, they're actually hitting around the map. They're not just in your face, so you have to do a little bit of searching. And this is where Syphon Filter shows its true colors as a game that changed the industry. Whether or not people realize it or not, Syphon Filter is similar to a Mario 64 or a Resident Evil 4. That sounds insane, I know, but let me explain to you what I mean. Syphon Filter is one of the early games that uses dynamic lighting. It has real life motion capturing, very surprising, and it tried its best to be this cinematic experience that went on to be Sony's entire identity. Going back to shooting for a moment, there are plenty of items in this game that Gabe can actually shoot and interact with. He can shoot out lights, beer bottles, test tubes containing poisonous gas. He can even shoot down chandeliers on bad guys' heads. This level of interactivity was in other games such as GoldenEye, but still for the time, not too many games did this, and this is why games like GoldenEye, Metal Gear Solid, and Syphon Filter stood out for having all these little details in it. Not only that, the lighting system in this game is pretty good. Among your weapons is a flashlight, and there are plenty of areas in this game that are completely dark that you cannot see until you bust out your flashlight. I was actually surprised at how detailed the lighting system was. Even when I was shooting out light bulbs and seeing that the lights in the environment were going dim was impressive. Even this hotel sign could be blown out, removing the red light around it. Not only that, they just used lighting in a cool way throughout the entire game.
Jehovah God actually just reminded me of an entire mission that was actually kind of frustrating a little bit for me, but it was still fun. Where the whole gimmick of the mission is that you're in a dark cave and you can only see using your night vision goggles. You could turn on the flashlight too, but you basically need to use a night vision sniper rifle in order to shoot bad guys. So this again is them playing with the lighting system for a PlayStation 1 game. This is very unique and something that we don't even see today anymore.
And one of the coolest weapons in this game that kind of sort of became Syphon Filter's thing is the taser that you can actually hit an enemy with and keep shocking them until they catch on fire. And again, this one weapon shows the great lighting system and the level of detail that Syphon Filter had for its time. Who in the world would say, hey, let's make a taser that can set an enemy on fire? This is just the level of creativity and freedom that these developers had back in those days. I don't think too many developers now would put something like this in a game because everything costs so much money that every aspect of a game has to matter or it's just not going to get included. In order to enjoy the beautiful lighting system, you got to explore the maps. And this is where the game kind of has a slight issue. It felt like almost every stage I hit a point where I was like, I don't know where to go. Now, there is a map in the main menu system. Each world is pretty small, so it's not that many places you can go and you really can't get lost. But it's almost like you can get stuck in a small area and the only saving grace is the fact that you know it ain't too many places for you to go, so you must be missing something. But the fact that I constantly kept missing the way to progress forward, it made me feel like this game had bad level design until Jehovah God mentioned something to me. Today, we're used to so many games telling us where to go and being very clear, even if they don't directly tell you to go here or go there. They'll put something in the environment like yellow paint or something like that that will guide the player. Games back in this time period, because the environment was so small like I mentioned, and there's only but so many places you could go, I think the developers left it up for the player to use their own ability to think to figure out where you should go next. To explore, which is basically a small box, so it's not like you're going all out your way to find something, but it's almost like you're missing something in plain view. One of the earliest missions in the game, you're in a subway system and I need to progress forward. I kept dying over and over because eventually I found a way to turn off this fire. But as I kept going forward to a place I thought I was supposed to go to, the game would just instantly kill me. Now I think that's bad design and they shouldn't have done that. Maybe they should have told me to turn around because you're supposed to complete other objectives before going forward. What you're supposed to do is get some bombs and blow up a hole in the wall so you can then get a guy to come in and disable a bomb for you. Not a big deal. Problem is that I didn't know where these bombs were. The good news is, going back to using your own brain and exploring this small map, the bombs were in a location that I kept running past because I just didn't happen to look down at them. It felt cheap to me at first. And then the game kept doing this. It kept happening where I'm like, okay, every single level, I am running into this issue where I get stuck and don't know where to go. And even when I look at the map, some mission objectives in the map will tell you exactly where to go, while others in the lore of the story, Gabe nor the agency he works for knows where he needs to go. So you have to figure it out on your own. Having to figure stuff out on my own felt like it was bad gameplay design until I remembered that was normal. Figuring stuff out on your own was normal for this time period. And that's what they were relying on. And once I got into the groove of that, it actually became rewarding to get stuck and say, okay, I know this game has a consistency of putting me in environments that are small enough where if I get stuck, the answer's somewhere nearby. I just kept overlooking it. And anytime I could stop and think that way, I had a great time solving the puzzles and problems on my own. One puzzle I got stuck on that Jehovah God helped me with was the puzzle in the museum. There was an elevator that I could clearly see went up to another floor, but every time I used it, it would only go up to the second floor, not the third. And I kept hearing a noise, but I didn't know where it was coming from. And the guy told me to look up, and I saw that there was an electrical box that was flickering sparks from it. I decided to shoot it, and it allowed me to go up the elevator. And I thought that was a really cool moment. There are plenty of moments like this in Syphon Filter. Now, where figuring things out on your own can get a little bit complicated, is when the game isn't so clear about what you're supposed to do. For example, in this snow mission, I was actually stuck because I was overthinking things for a moment. They tell you about some motion sensors that you should avoid, and when I saw these red glowing lights by these guards, I thought those were it. So it made me turn around, and then I realized like there was no place for me to go. These aren't actually motion sensors. This is actually the alarm system. So if the alarm goes off, you'll see these red flashing lights. But I guess that's the price to pay for allowing the player to think for themselves. The player might actually think beyond the point that the developer is trying to make. As far as missions go, the mission variety in this game is really impressive, not just for the time, like even for today. Every level has multiple objectives, and these objectives can be very different from one another, making none of the stages feel boring or repetitive. Now, in the beginning of the game, you will focus a lot on bomb disposal, but even then, in the beginning of the game, it's basically just an all-out shootout with you taking out some terrorists. Then you have to escape a subway that blew up, have a boss fight on the subway tracks. Then you have to defend the bomb disposal unit in the park, and this mission is pretty cool because there's like a subplot where you have to snipe a guy in the tennis park to save some hostages. And by the way, as cool as this level is, I don't know if you guys are going to see it on your screen, this level is just green. I know they were trying to make this level look foggy, and back in the day, the FOV in games was very low, and we're going to talk about how that affects gameplay in a minute, but this level has the weirdest colors. Like, it actually almost hurts my eyes because on my screen, it looks grayish green. But when I look back at it on OBS or on my computer screen, it just looks completely green. I don't know why that's like that, but that should not look this way. My favorite sequence in this game is actually being in the museum because this is where Syphon Filter actually shines. This environment is mostly stealth based. Logan will have to crouch walk his way through the entire environment and snipe guys in the head with his silent pistol. I think this is where the gameplay shines the best. Anytime you had to do stealth in Syphon Filter, the game was amazing. In fact, this goes back into that FOV problem I mentioned. When the game ramps up and you're constantly fighting guys with heavy machinery, you'll realize that walking at normal speed or just running forward is dumb because what ends up happening is enemies spawn in once you get closer to them with the FOV. You can even see this with your sniper rifle. If you aim in first person and an enemy ends up walking past the field of view, they'll just disappear off the screen and you can't see them anymore. So what ends up happening is if you're running and gunning and not paying attention, you could just run straight into a crowd of enemies, where if you were crouch walking and slowly approaching them, the game will load them in and then you can actually pick them off one by one. There was actually one time I think I was moving too slow or fast for the game, or this was just a glitch where an enemy was invisible and the only thing that was there was his gun. I got to kill him, but it was kind of weird. But that just shows you that this game's technical limitations for the time held it back in some ways, but you could use those to your advantage in the gameplay. The stealth isn't deep by any means. Like, all you really can do is just hide behind stuff, peek your head out and take pop shots with your silenced weapons or whatever weapon you want to use. And there'll be even moments in heavy gunfire where you need to do the same thing, making this game feel more tactical than the average third-person shooter. But even though it's not deep, you know what? For it to be this good and this simple is actually a testament for the time. Think about Metal Gear Solid 1. That doesn't have deep stealth gameplay mechanics, but it's still one of the best stealth games out there because it mastered the basics of just making sneaking around fun. And that's exactly what Syphon Filter does. Now, if it had a better frame rate and I could aim at the enemies when I see them and my cursor doesn't slightly get off them ever so slightly and they didn't just kill me instantly, it would be 10 times better. But just creeping around, solid. As I mentioned before, Syphon Filter has boss fights, which I was surprised to see. All of them were pretty good and had like a miniature gimmick involved to enhance the gameplay because the gameplay really doesn't evolve much as you play through the game, so they had to come up with something to make it feel unique for the boss fights. As I already mentioned, you'll be fighting a boss on these train tracks, dodging the trains back and forth while we're doing some running and gunning. There's another boss fight where this guy's like shooting you with a flamethrower as you circle around him in this room, and it reminds me of the Dingo Dow fight from Crash Bandicoot 3. Gabe has to shoot down an attack helicopter, which I wouldn't be surprised was inspired by Metal Gear Solid 1. And the funniest boss fight of them all has to be the last boss fight in the game. It is the hardest boss fight because there's a zero warning. This guy will instantly kill you. He has a grenade launcher that just blows you to bits. And let me tell you what you're supposed to do in this fight. I thought that I just found like a cheap solution, but no, the cutscene confirms this is the canon way you're supposed to fight this boss. You get in this boss room by, first of all, you have to run in here and hurry up and enter some codes because within the story, if you don't hurry up and do this, the world is going to be basically be over because of the Syphon Filter virus. So you rush through this level, you probably took some damage along the way, you're going to probably be weak. And then you type in these codes, and then the boss fight basically just starts after a cutscene, and you're going to be thrown off guard, but thankfully there's a checkpoint. This game is really good at having checkpoints in places they know the game is about to be a bunch of BS. They throw you a checkpoint, so after you get blown to smithereens a bunch of times, you'll finally figure out the correct route to take and run away from him, and then you'll realize your bullets don't do much damage. What you're supposed to do is kill these guys in these glass windows, and they're going to be gas grenades in here. Gas grenades are one of the most deadliest weapons in the game. And you're going to want to do is hope that the main villain pops up on your map so you know where to aim the grenade, and once you hit him, he instantly dies. And even in the cutscene, it shows him dying by the grenade. So this is what you're supposed to do. This is one of the most cryptic ways to kill a boss in any game, because nothing about this makes sense. This feels like some cheap exploit the player figures out, but this is really what they wanted you to do. They wanted you to do it this way. It's insane. Something I forgot to mention is this game was made without the dual stick controller in mind, even though it came years after the dual stick controller was made. And boy, would this game have been better if it used it, because the controls in this game work, but this is one of those games where you're going to be pressing multiple buttons at once just to do simple commands. So let's say you want to crouch, you just hold X, right? After that, let's say you want to aim in first person. You hold L1 while holding X to crouch and aim. Let's say you want to move your cursor around. You can use the D-pad, or you can use the analog stick, because the emulator the PS5 is using is mapping that to a D-pad. This game doesn't have analog controls, but it does work somewhat better than using a D-pad to aim, because it's a little bit quicker. This is where it gets complicated. Let's say I need to lean from behind cover while crouching while in first person. Now my hand is on 3 different buttons, and I need to aim while I'm doing this. So now I got to control the D-pad, and keep in mind, I'm doing all this in a 20 frames per second game that doesn't feel the best to play. And I can see why somebody will buy this game on PSN and not play it anymore, because they're just not from this time period and can't get used to these clunky controls. It's hard to say that this game was clunky for the time, because I don't know too many games that were a third-person shooter with this level of detail when it came to its motion capturing. And speaking of motion capturing, Gabe, when you move him around, it uses tank controls. The only time the game doesn't use the tank controls is when you're locking on. Then all of a sudden the game uses sorta kinda analog movement, but not really, because this game doesn't use analog sticks. And everything, again, just feels sort of clunky. Now, as someone who didn't like tank controls originally, I will say this is one of the few games where tank controls actually feel sort of okay, because the environment is big enough where you're not going to accidentally run into something because you're getting used to the controls, which is something you would face in, say, a Resident Evil game. But what I will say is that this game does something I don't particularly think is good for tank controls. When Gabe moves forward, if you then move to the left or right, he will maintain his forward movement. He won't just stop in his tracks and then turn to left or right. He will like move to the left or right. And that is so weird, because other games with tank controls, that only works if you're holding down forward and the directional button to the left or to the right. So you're in control of it, not it automatically keeps his momentum going. It's a very strange design choice that if you're used to tank controls, you're going to have to get used to how this feels, because there's going to be times where you're thinking you're going to pause and then turn to the left or right to get your bearings, but your character is just going to keep moving in that direction. There's also a strafe button with the 2 triggers at the top. That works pretty well when you need to hide behind cover and pop out and run across the stage to the other side of the screen. That works pretty well. But overall, the controls, if it wasn't held back by the frame rate and the Grand Theft Auto 4 level of physics, like I'm telling you, if Rockstar one day came out and said they were inspired by Syphon Filter's physics when they were creating the Rage engine for GTA 4, I wouldn't be surprised, because this guy moves just like Nico Bellic. The same way Nico Bellic leans all the way to the left, all the way to the right when he's moving across the screen, this guy Logan does the same exact thing, and it just made me laugh every time I was playing the game, because I was like, it feels like I'm playing GTA 4 again. I think I covered Syphon Filter from head to toe. The gameplay is solid, but due to the poor frame rate and the annoying enemy spawns, it can be frustrating at times. But I think this is a game that is worth playing, because it is so much fun. Once you get back into that old school mindset of trial and error gameplay and realizing that you're going to have to use your own wits to get through the stages, and the game isn't just going to tell you the answer to every problem. Now, the story to Syphon Filter is pretty funny and interesting from a historical level, because like I said, a lot of this game, if you pay close attention, it is the prototype for what Sony would become in the future, especially in the PS3 era. You see a lot of those design elements right here in Syphon Filter. This is the big budget movie meets video game that Sony ended up pioneering in the PlayStation 3 era. They've always been doing it, but that was the era where they really hammered it down, especially with third-person shooters, which this game is. The story itself isn't anything remarkable, but it is enjoyable. Sort of like one of those movies you would find like on Netflix one day that looks cheesy, and then you turn it on and realize, oh, that was a good little action romp with a bunch of explosions. That's what this game is. Matter of fact, there's actually some funny moments in the game where, like, I don't know if it's an audio glitch, bug, or just a creative decision. Logan will talk extra fast to emphasize that he needs to hurry up and do something, and it just sounds ridiculous.
A beacon. Wait, Leon, this one's different from the others. It has a shorter timer, and it looks...
that's not viral. It's
too late.
And that's a lot of this game's dialogue, and even the character models for the time. Like, the motion capturing is really good. The characters, come on, you gotta admit, these guys look like Roblox characters. It's so hilarious how these cutscenes look, but I gotta give them credit because I see what they wanted to do, but the technology just didn't allow for it, or maybe even their own skills didn't allow for it. But for what they could pull off, this is a very detailed game, especially with the cinematic cutscenes. When it comes to the actual story itself, though, it boils down to this. Syphon Filter is a virus that only attacks very specific groups of people depending upon how it's coded, and Logan has to figure out who's behind everything. There's a terrorist named Romer that you're chasing around, another terrorist named Mara that's, you don't know whose side she's on. She's clearly a villain, but there's a point in the game where she works with you because it seems like the people she was working for betrayed her. And this game is filled with the classic plot twists of, oh my God, the agency that I work for is the real villains, and oh my God, my partner that I thought was dead is actually still alive, and you know, that type of stuff. But it's fun, it's cheesy, it's fun, and you'll have a good time playing through it. And I gotta say, this game has one of the biggest what the F endings ever, because it kind of just ends. Like, seriously, the ending of the game is Logan's partner Leon just asking him, like, what was the whole point of this? Like, what was the motivation behind the villains, which they never explain? And Logan's just like, I don't know what any of this means, but we got to stop them. And then it just ends. It's like, what? Like, don't answer my question that I was waiting for the entire game to get an explanation on with, I don't know, and then just end the game with credits. I thought, but it was done so shockingly quick. I just laughed about it. Like, I'm laughing about it, thinking about it, how ridiculous. You could just imagine watching an entire movie where there's a bunch of explosions and cool stuff going on, and it's just enough there where you wonder, okay, what is it all about? What's the inner workings of everything? And they're just like, we didn't think of anything, so watch the next movie. And you know what? It actually worked because Jehovah God blessed me with Syphon Filter 2, so I'm definitely going to be covering that game soon. So what can I say about Syphon Filter? Sure, it has its rough patches, but this is arguably a classic PlayStation 1 game. The 90 that it got on Metacritic, I think that's a little too high, but I do understand and recognize this game is important for Sony as a brand. Not just Sony as a brand, but this is one of the few games during this time period that I feel was pushing technology, and what Syphon Filter did with its motion capturing, its lighting system, it trying to blend the movie genre and the video game genre, which other people did as well, but the way they did it, arguably so many other developers did as well that I don't know if they borrowed from Syphon Filter directly or not, but you got to give it credit for at least doing it before everyone else. And that's something that's worth experiencing. Even if you're someone that doesn't care about gaming history and you just want a fun game to play, for $10, this is still worth playing even with its faults, and you're going to get a solid 3 to 4 days out of it. And if you're a trophy hunter like myself, it has a pretty easy platinum that you could get too. Syphon Filter was a fun game that I was not expecting to ever play because it's just never been on my radar or something on my mind, but God will take you to places that you never thought you would have been. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the hype button. I'll show you where that is right now on the screen. Again, I'm grateful for each and every one of you for stopping by, and let me know what you think in the comment section of Syphon Filter. Have you played it before? Is this review inspiring you to try it out? Or if you did play it in the past, Did you enjoy the game? What are some of the things you liked and disliked about the series? And I hope you guys are having a great 2026, and I hope you all have a blessed year. Peace out, keep gaming, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Too late.